The way to do this in Rails is with what's called action mailer. So let me show you how that works. We're going to generate a mailer in the same way we've generated other things so far. In this case, the mailer is going to be related to users. We're going to use the same mailer both for the account activations and for the password resets. So let's make a user mailer. And then at the same time, we're going to create a couple of the equivalent of actions. These are the analog of actions. They're just methods, but they're going to be called account activation and password reset. We'll see the effects of this in a moment. Let's take a look at what that gave us. So we can go to app mailers, usermailer.rb. You can see we've got account activation and password reset. There's a default greeting, which is just hi, in an instance variable, and then there's a line that actually mails to a particular email address. We can see the emails themselves in the views here. There's views user mailer. You can see here this is account activation.html. You can see that this is an HTML email, and then this is account activation.text, T-E-X-T. So this is a plain text version, and this is an HTML version. Let's set up the mailer here. So up here you can see there's a default from email address, so I'm going to change this to no reply. This is a quick insert showing a difference in Rails 4.2. In 4.2, this default from is no longer in the user mailer. Instead, there's a dedicated application mailer. So let me pull that in here. I've already made this change. So let's pull it in, and we can see here. So now we've got user mailer inherits from application mailer. Before it was action mailer base. So now it's application mailer, and that mailer is right here. So there's a default from here. So you should change that right here rather than editing the user mailer. You should edit the application mailer. And meanwhile, there are these mailer layouts. So you can look at app, views, layouts, and you can see the mailer just has some HTML structure, and for the HTML mailer, and then the text mailer is just a yield. So this is similar to this, to the application .html.drb right here. So this yield is basically the same thing. Just inserts the contents right here. And then instead of a greeting, I'm going to create a user. So we're going to need a user in these templates here, these views, because the activation URL will need an activation token, and that's going to be on a user object. So @user is equal to a given user, so that's actually going to be a parameter to the account activation mailer. And we want to mail to the user's email address. And we can actually put a subject line in here too. There we go. Now let's take a look at the kind of URL we want to send. In here, we're going to do something like this. Actually, let's do the plain text first. It's a little easier. Let's do hi. We can treat this just like a regular view. We can have embedded Ruby here @user.name. And then we can give them a greeting. So this will give them some instructions, and then right here we need a link. So we can use the link to helper in here. Let's link to the word activate. And then we need to figure out what's the URL here. This is the challenge. So recall that if you do something like this, you end up with the URL like this. Actually, I can just do it like this here. This is example.com/users/1/edit. Right, so this is the ID here. It comes from @user. So in this case, we're going to do this. We're going to do edit account activation URL, and we're going to give it, I mentioned this before briefly, we're going to give it the activation token. And so if we look at the user model, a newly created user has an activation token right here. So that's going to be like this, @user.activation token. And then we also want to have some other information in this URL. Remember from the table, we're going to find the user by email. We could use the ID, and in fact we are exposing the IDs like this here in the URLs of the application. But in principle, we might want to obfuscate that at some point, say if we wanted to hide how many users there were on the site. So it's a good idea to use something other than the ID. So we're going to use the email. And that means we need to put the email in this URL. Let's just recall what these tokens look like. Go here. These are base 64 strings. So this is the kind of thing that would show up in the URL. We would have a URL of the form example.com/account activations / and then the analog of this 1, which is in this case just a token. It's going to be like this, /edit. But then we also want this email in the URL so that we can pass it back to the application. And so the way that works in a URL is that you have a query parameter after a question mark. So you do like this, question mark, and then the key value pairs. Email equals foo, say foo. So ordinarily you would think add example.com like this. But in fact, this @ sign in a URL has to be escaped out, and there's a special character code for that. That's %40. And Rails will do that for us automatically if we write something like this. Oh, and I realized I actually did something wrong here. This link to, this is HTML, so this is going to put in an anchor tag. This will be fine to put inside this here. Do this here. So this is the HTML mail, and then this will be the same URL in here. So this will be the actual URL. What we want is embedded Ruby with the link itself, so it's just going to be this here that we built up. Let's copy that, and it's going to be edit account activation URL with the token and then the email address. And then we want that here. As well. And let's put it in H1 here, sample app. We can also reuse this here, but except this time in the paragraph tag. Okay, let's save these and see the effects of that.